Have you ever wished you could just express yourself better in English? Like have the words come out more easily, or maybe you just want to sound a little more like a native speaker.
I think we all feel that way sometimes. It's a common thing among English learners, wanting to sound more natural and fluent.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we're diving into today, this idea of shadowing.
Right. Shadowing. We've been talking a lot about different techniques for learning English, and this one, well, it really stands out.
It does. And it's interesting. We keep seeing it pop up again and again in all these different resources, like the BBX Learning English podcast, which is where we're pulling some really cool insights from for this deep dive.
That podcast was packed with information, a lot of great stuff about shadowing and how effective it can be.
Okay, so shadowing might sound a bit, technical at first glance, but it's actually a really simple concept.
It is. It's basically like becoming an echo. You listen to someone speaking in English, and then you immediately repeat what they say.
Exactly. Like a vocal mirror. You try to copy everything, their pronunciation, their rhythm, even their tone of voice.
And it's not just about mindlessly repeating words, right? It's about tuning into those subtle nuances that make native speakers sound so natural.
You're totally right. It's about capturing the music of the language, almost like you're singing along.
And that's where the real magic happens, When you start to internalize those patterns and rhythms, it becomes so much easier to speak more naturally.
Absolutely. And the coolest thing, a lot of people who are really successful with English, like professionals who use it every day, they actually use this technique.
It's not just some random trick. Shadowing is a tried and tested method that can really help you level up your English.
Exactly. So our mission today is to break it all down for you, to give you a clear understanding of what shadowing is, why it works, and how you can start using it right away to improve your own English.
Sounds good. Let's start with the basics. What exactly is shadowing and how does it work?
Well, if you listen to Jason and Julia on their BBX podcast, they describe it as listening to native English speech and then immediately repeating it, almost without any pause.
It's like your voice is running parallel to the speakers. You try to match their pronunciation, their speed, their intonation, everything.
Right. Like they gave that great example, remember, where Jason said, English is fun to learn if you practice every day.
And then Julia repeated it back with that same kind of upbeat tone and emphasis on certain words. It was a perfect example of how shadowing works in practice.
Yeah, it really showed that it's not just about saying the words. It's about capturing the whole feel of the sentence, the way a native speaker would actually say it.
And there are actually a few different ways you can approach shadowing.
Right. It's not just one size fits all. You can adjust it to fit your own level and learning style.
So the most intense version is what they call immediate repetition. You literally try to repeat every word as soon as you hear it with no pauses.
That one can be a bit challenging, especially when you're just starting out, but it's amazing for building fluency and getting those pronunciation details down.
And then there's the listen, then pause and repeat method. This one's a little gentler on the brain. You get a moment to process what you heard before you try to say it.
Yeah, that's a good option if you're working with longer sentences or if you need a little extra time to figure out what the speaker is saying.
And another really useful variation is to use audio that's been slowed down.
Right. There are lots of resources out there like podcasts and YouTube videos that are specifically designed for English learners, and they often have options to slow down the playback speed.
And that can be really helpful because it allows you to focus on the individual sounds and get your pronunciation more accurate before you try to speak at full speed.
It's like training wheels for your tongue.
Exactly. And maybe one of the most powerful things about shadowing is that it forces you to think in English.
Oh, absolutely. Because you're not translating in your head, you're just listening and reacting, just like you would in a real conversation.
And that's huge, because it helps you break free from that habit of translating everything, which can really slow you down when you're trying to speak.
Yeah, it's like you're training your brain to switch gears and start processing English directly.
Okay, so we've talked about what shadowing is and the different ways you can do it. But why is it so effective? What are the actual benefits?
Well, the BBX team laid out some really clear advantages. And I think it's helpful to think about these as direct wins for you as a learner.
Absolutely. And I think the most obvious one is pronunciation. When you're shadowing, you're constantly trying to match the way a native speaker sounds. So naturally, your pronunciation gets better.
It's like you're retraining your mouth and your ears to produce and perceive English sounds more accurately.
Right. It's similar to how babies learn to talk. They listen to the adults around them and they try to imitate the sounds they hear.
Exactly. And shadowing gives you that same kind of immersive listening experience. And you know what else? It helps you stop translating in your head.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one. So many learners get stuck in that translation loop where they're constantly trying to convert everything back and forth between English and their native language.
And it's exhausting. Plus, it makes your speech sound hesitant and unnatural.
And shadowing helps you break free from that. You start to think in English, which makes you more fluent and more confident.
It's like you're building a new pathway in your brain, one that goes straight from thought to spoken English.
And it's not just about thinking and speaking. Shadowing also improves your listening skills.
Oh yeah, it's like a 2-for-1 workout. You're training your ears to pick up on the subtle details of spoken English while also practicing your speaking skills.
You're getting double the benefit in the same amount of time. And it can also boost your confidence, you know?
Absolutely. Many learners are scared to speak because they're worried about making mistakes or sounding awkward.
And shadowing can help you overcome that fear. Because you're constantly hearing yourself speak in English, it starts to feel more natural and less intimidating.
Like you get used to the sound of your own voice speaking the language. And that can make a huge difference in how confident you feel in real conversations.
And let's not forget the practical side of things. Shadowing is super convenient. You can do it anywhere, anytime.
You don't need a language partner. You don't need special equipment. All you need is some audio and a pair of headphones. It's like having a personal English coach in your pocket.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We know what shadowing is, why it works, and the benefits it offers. But how do you actually do it? What are the steps involved?
Well, the BBX podcast gave a really nice step-by-step guide that we can follow.
Okay, cool. Let's walk through it. What's the first step?
The first step is all about choosing the right audio.
Right. You want to find something that's clear, natural sounding, and at the right level for you.
Exactly. You don't want to start with something that's way too difficult and demotivating.
Face-adjusted things like podcasts, audiobooks, news reports, even YouTube videos.
Yeah, there's tons of great content out there. And for beginners, they specifically recommended finding materials with subtitles so you can follow along more easily.
That's a great tip. And they also mentioned looking for podcasts or videos that are specifically designed for English learners.
Because those often have slower speech and simpler vocabulary, which can be really helpful when you're just starting out.
Okay, so you've got your audio. What's next?
Next, you just listen. Don't try to repeat anything yet. Just listen to the audio a couple of times and focus on understanding the words, pronunciation, and the overall rhythm.
It's like priming your brain. You're getting familiar with the sounds and the patterns before you try to produce them yourself.
Right. And once you feel like you have a good grasp of the audio, then you can start shadowing.
So you hit play and you start repeating after the speaker, trying to match their tone, their pronunciation, their speed, everything as closely as you can.
And don't worry if you miss a word or two. The important thing is to keep going and not get stuck.
Just try to stay with the flow of the speech. And if you find that the natural speed is too fast, don't be afraid to slow it down.
Yeah, most podcast apps and YouTube have playback speed controls.
Yeah.
You can easily adjust it to a pace that's comfortable for you.
And another helpful tip is to repeat the same audio multiple times.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Because each time you listen and shadow, you'll pick up on new things and your pronunciation will get better and better.
They even suggested sticking with the same short clip for a few days, like really drilling down and mastering it before moving on to something new.
And here's a fun idea. Record yourself while you're shadowing.
That's a good one. I do that sometimes. It can be a little cringy to listen to yourself at first, but it's really helpful for identifying areas where you can improve.
Totally. You can compare your recording to the original audio and see how closely you're matching the speaker's intonation, stress, and rhythm.
So we know how to choose audio, how to listen, and how to shadow. What about the content itself? What are some good things to shadow?
Well, the BBX folks had some great recommendations.
Okay, what did they suggest?
For starters, they highlighted podcasts that are specifically designed for English learners.
Oh yeah, those are fantastic. They usually have clear pronunciation, slower speech, and vocabulary that's relevant to everyday life.
Plus, you often get exposed to different accents, which is great for developing your listening skills.
And they gave some good examples too, like the British Council podcast, the BBC Learning English podcast, and the Easy English Talk podcast.
All great choices. And then there's audiobooks. They're another excellent option for shadowing.
Because they're usually narrated by professional voice actors, so you get really clear and expressive speech.
And the storytelling element can be really engaging, which makes the practice more enjoyable.
And they recommended some beginner-friendly titles like The Little Prince, Charlotte's Web, and The Alchemist.
All classics. And of course, we can't forget about YouTube.
Oh yeah, YouTube is a goldmine for English learners. There's so much content out there.
And it's all free. Just make sure you choose videos with accurate subtitles so you can double check what you're hearing.
Good point. And they mentioned some channels that are particularly good for learning English, like BBC Learning English, TED Talks, and Easy English Talk.
All great resources. And for more advanced learners, they suggested using movies and TV shows.
That can be a bit more challenging because the dialogue is faster and more natural, but it's also really rewarding.
Because it exposes you to real-life conversations and helps you pick up on idioms and slang.
And they recommended starting with shows or movies that have clear, slower dialogue, like Friends, The King's Speech, or The Pursuit of Happiness.
Good choices. And again, if it feels too fast, you can always adjust the playback speed.
So we've talked about the benefits of shadowing, how to do it, and what kind of content to use. What about the pitfalls? What are some common mistakes that learners make?
Well, the BBX podcast actually addressed that very question. They pointed out several common mistakes that people make when they're shadowing.
Oh, that's helpful. What are some of them?
One of the biggest ones is trying to speak too fast without understanding what you're saying.
Oh yeah, that's a classic mistake. People get so focused on keeping up with the speaker that they forget to actually process the meaning.
And that defeats the whole purpose of shadowing. It's not about speed, it's about comprehension and accurate pronunciation.
So the solution is to always listen to the audio for understanding before you start shadowing. And if it's too fast, slow it down.
Another common mistake is mumbling instead of speaking clearly.
People tend to do that when they're trying to go too fast. They sacrifice clarity for speed.
And that's a problem because it prevents you from really practicing your pronunciation properly.
So the fix is to focus on clear articulation, even if it means slowing down at first. Record yourself and listen back to make sure you're speaking clearly.
And another mistake is skipping over difficult words.
Yeah, I've been guilty of that myself. It's tempting to just gloss over the words you don't know.
But that's a missed opportunity to learn something new and improve your pronunciation.
So the best approach is to pause the audio, look up the word, and practice saying it a few times before continuing.
And here's one that's really important: sounding flat while you're shadowing.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. English has a natural rhythm and intonation, and if you don't pay attention to that, your speech will sound robotic and unnatural.
So the key is to really listen to how the speaker's voice goes up and down and try to mimic those changes in pitch. You can even use your hands to follow the intonation patterns.
That's a good visual aid. And finally, a common challenge is giving up too soon.
Yeah, people often get discouraged because they don't see results immediately.
It's important to remember that language learning takes time and effort. Be patient with yourself and keep practicing consistently.
And track your progress. Maybe record yourself once a week and listen back to see how you're improving.
Those recordings can be really motivating. Okay, so we know what to do and what not to do. How can we make shadowing more effective and more enjoyable?
Well, I think the first and foremost thing is to be patient. Remember that learning a language takes time. You're not going to sound perfect overnight.
Right. Don't get discouraged by those early stumbles. Just keep practicing and trust the process.
And speaking of practice, consistency is key. Even short, regular sessions are better than long, sporadic ones.
Try to make shadowing a part of your daily routine. Even just 5 or 10 minutes a day can make a big difference over time.
And here's a fun tip. Choose content that you actually enjoy.
Oh yeah, that's important. If you're not interested in what you're listening to, you're not going to be as engaged or motivated.
So find podcasts, audiobooks, or videos on topics that you're passionate about. It'll make the whole experience more enjoyable, and you'll be more likely to stick with it.
So are you ready for a challenge?
Ooh, I love a good challenge. What do you have in mind?
Well, the BBX team proposed a 7-day shadowing challenge, and I think it would be a great way to put all of this into practice.
A 7-day shadowing challenge. That sounds awesome. Tell me more.
It's pretty simple. For the next 7 days, you commit to practicing shadowing every day.
Sounds doable.
And here are the steps. First, you choose a short piece of English audio that you find interesting. It could be a podcast clip, a YouTube video, a paragraph from an audiobook, anything really.
Okay, that's easy enough.
Then you listen to that audio once all the way through, just for comprehension. No repeating it.
Got it. Just focus on understanding what the speaker is saying.
Exactly. Then you listen again, and this time you shadow along. Try to match the speaker's pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation as closely as you can.
Okay, that's the fun part.
And lastly, you record yourself shadowing on the first day and then again on the 7th day.
Ah, so you can track your progress and see how much you've improved.
That's right. And we'd love to hear about your experience.
Yeah. Share your thoughts in the comments, send us a message, or post about it online using the hashtag shadowing challenge.
Let us know what you're shadowing, what challenges you're facing, and what breakthroughs you're having.
We're excited to see how you all progress. So, to sum it all up, shadowing is a really powerful technique for improving your English pronunciation, fluency, and confidence.
But like any skill, it takes consistent practice to see results.
So if you're serious about leveling up your English, we encourage you to take on the 7-day shadowing challenge.
It's a fun and effective way to experience the benefits of shadowing firsthand.
And if you found this deep dive helpful, please share it with other English learners who might benefit from it.
Absolutely. Let's spread the word about this amazing technique.
So keep practicing, keep shadowing, and keep moving forward on your English learning journey.
Remember, every step you take, no matter how small, brings you closer to your goals. And that's something to celebrate.
And you know what? I think that's a great note to end on. You've given us a lot to think about today, and I'm definitely feeling inspired to start my own shadowing challenge.
You too. I think it's a fantastic way to refresh our skills and keep pushing ourselves to improve.
So to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into shadowing. We hope you found it valuable, and we can't wait to hear about your progress. Keep learning, keep practicing, and keep those English muscles working.
And remember, the most important thing is to have fun along the way. Because when you enjoy the process, the results will follow naturally.
That's so true.
Yeah.
So go out there, find some awesome English audio, and start shadowing your way to fluency.
We'll be cheering you on every step of the way.
Until next time, happy learning, everyone.
See you soon.